So this is how it ends? The words hung in the air between us like a toxic fog, each one dripping with betrayal. My husband, Daniel, stood there, his back straight, his expression cold. He hadn't even bothered to meet my eyes as he spoke the words that shattered my world. After 15 years of marriage, years spent building a life together, he was walking away. I had always believed in the vows we took, in the promises we made. But here I was, alone in a room that once felt like home, watching him toss those vows aside like they meant nothing. He looked at me with that same distant gaze, as though I were just another piece of furniture, something that had grown old and needed replacing. I've already made my decision, Daniel continued, his voice flat, detached. It's over. We're done. The words stung more than I expected, but strangely, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply stared at him, feeling the weight of the years we spent together, those years that seemed to have evaporated in the blink of an eye. As I stood there, trying to process the enormity of what had just been said, I realized something. This wasn't just the end of our marriage. This was the moment I would take back control of my life. The moment I would stop being the woman who waited quietly for approval, and start becoming the woman I was always meant to be. Part of our storytelling community. If tales of strength in the face of betrayal resonate with you, please hit subscribe. It's completely free and helps support more stories of women reclaiming their power. Now let's see how this unfolds. I took a deep breath, my fingers trembling as I folded the papers in front of me. They were divorce papers, his. I had expected this moment to feel like a breakdown, but instead, there was clarity. A strange calm washed over me, as if the universe had been waiting for me to wake up from a long sleep. Daniel's face remained impassive as I slowly picked up the papers. If you want this, then it's yours, I said, my voice steady, despite the chaos inside. I wasn't asking for this. I wasn't pleading for him to stay. I was offering him exactly what he wanted, freedom. I slid the papers across the table, and in that moment, I knew he had no idea what I was really handing him. He took the papers without a word, his fingers brushing mine for the briefest moment. He didn't notice the way my heart pounded or the way I had to force myself to remain calm. He didn't see the years of sacrifice, the silent patience, the love that I had poured into our marriage, now reduced to a simple transaction. As he signed, I turned to leave, but not before I spoke the words I had held inside for years. Congratulations, Daniel. You're free. I walked out of that room, my heels clicking against the floor like a steady rhythm. I had made my decision, too. I was no longer the woman who was willing to accept being invisible. I was the woman who reclaimed her power. The next few days felt like a blur, a whirlwind of emotions that I couldn't quite sort through. On one hand, there was a strange sense of freedom, an unshackling of years of emotional weight. On the other, there was the quiet hum of regret that whispered through my thoughts like a persistent echo. I had been a good wife, a supportive partner, and yet, it had never been enough for him. But now, I wasn't the same person. I had walked out of that house without turning back, and as I stood in my new apartment, the silence didn't feel as heavy as it had before. I could hear the city below, the hum of life moving forward without me. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was missing out. I was free to build a new life, one where my happiness didn't depend on anyone but myself. I decided to take control of my future. The next morning, I woke up early, made myself a cup of coffee, and looked out the window at the skyline. It was a clear day, and the sunlight filtered in, warming my face as I sat at the small table by the window. I opened my laptop and began working on a business idea I had been putting off for years. I had always wanted to be my own boss, but Daniel had never believed in me enough to support it. Now, it was time for me to believe in myself. Weeks turned into months, and I threw myself into my new venture. I attended networking events, met people who shared my passion, and slowly, I began to build something that was completely my own. The satisfaction of making decisions for myself, without having to justify them to anyone, was exhilarating. I was creating a life that no one could take from me. And then came the invitation. It was a simple white card with gold edges, elegant, almost too formal for what I had expected. My mother had invited me to a family gathering. Lily and Daniel would be there, of course, and they would probably expect me to come as the ex-wife, the one who had failed. But something inside me told me that this was the moment to face them, to show them who I had become. I put the card down and took a deep breath. I wasn't going to go as the broken woman they remembered. I was going to walk in as the woman I had always been, the one they hadn't taken the time to notice. The one who had survived without them. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of their judgment. This was my life now, and I was going to live it on my own terms. The evening arrived faster than I expected. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my dress. It was simple, elegant, but it made me feel powerful. It was a dress that said, "I am confident, I am whole, and I am proud of the woman I've become." I had no idea what to expect at the gathering. Would they look at me with pity, with judgment? Or would they finally see me as the woman I had always been, the one they had never really taken the time to notice? As I walked into the event, I could feel the eyes on me immediately. The murmur of conversation quieted just enough for me to hear the soft gasps that passed between some of the guests. The once familiar faces were now distant, unfamiliar in a way that was freeing. I walked across the room, my head held high, my posture straight, like I owned the space. In a way, I did. I spotted my mother first, standing with Lily and Daniel. The look on her face was one of discomfort, like she wasn't sure whether to smile or turn away. Her eyes darted to me, and for a moment, I saw a flash of guilt. She had made her choice years ago when she had sided with Daniel, believing that his career would be my greatest accomplishment. But she didn't understand that I had always been my own success. Lily, on the other hand, was more openly surprised. Her gaze shifted between me and Daniel, confusion and jealousy flashing in her eyes. She wasn't the little sister anymore. She was just another person in the room who didn't have control over her own fate. She had what she wanted, Daniel, but she was still trapped in her own insecurities. I could see it in the way she tried to hide her discomfort behind a polite smile. Daniel, he was different. He was the same, yet not. The man who had once been my world looked at me with something I couldn't quite place. Was it regret? Shame? Or just plain confusion? The confident, cocky man I once knew was now visibly nervous, his eyes darting around the room, trying to avoid meeting mine. For the first time in a long time, I could see that he didn't hold the power he thought he had. And then, without any hesitation, I walked over to them. "Hello, everyone," I said calmly, my voice steady but carrying through the room. Daniel stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. He hadn't expected me to approach him. He hadn't expected me to be the one to take charge of the situation. But I wasn't there to make him feel bad. I wasn't there to ruin the night. I was there to show him that I had moved on, that I had built a life without him. I looked directly at him and smiled. "Congratulations, Daniel," I said, my words soft but filled with meaning. "You made your choice. I hope it brings you happiness." His face went pale. He didn't speak. He couldn't. The words I'd spoken had cut deeper than anything I could have said in anger. And I knew, in that moment, that I had done exactly what I needed to do. The night went on, but the energy had shifted. What was once a room full of polite chatter and laughter now felt heavy. The smiles seemed forced, the conversations too sharp, and the air thick with unsaid words. I could feel the weight of it all. My presence had changed something in the room, something they had all tried so hard to ignore. But it was clear now. I wasn't the same woman they had once known. I wasn't just someone's wife, someone's daughter. I had become my own person, and that was the most unsettling thing of all. I made my way through the room, engaging with a few people who were genuinely happy to see me. I wasn't afraid to smile, to laugh, or to talk with ease. But the longer I stayed, the more I realized, I wasn't just reclaiming my life, I was taking back my power. It was a quiet power, the kind that doesn't demand attention, but instead commands respect. I had spent so many years trying to be what others wanted me to be. But tonight, I was finally myself. As I stood by the bar, sipping on a glass of wine, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. Not because I had won, but because I had been true to myself. The years of sacrifice, of silence, of trying to keep everyone else happy, they were all behind me now. I wasn't seeking revenge. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was simply existing, in a way that I had never been allowed to do before. But then, from across the room, I saw Daniel again. He was standing with Lily, his arm draped around her waist, but his eyes were on me. He was watching me, and I could see the conflict in his gaze. It was as if he couldn't quite reconcile the woman standing before him with the one he had left behind. His lips moved, but I couldn't hear what he said to Lily. I didn't need to hear it. The look on his face said it all. He had underestimated me. He had underestimated the strength inside me that he had never bothered to see. For a moment, I felt a flicker of something. Was it sadness? Regret? Perhaps. But what came next was not what I expected. Lily, standing beside him, turned her head and met my gaze. She smiled, a small, almost pitying smile, before turning back to Daniel. It was subtle, but it was there, that recognition of what had been lost. She knew. They both knew. In that moment, I realized that they would never understand. They could never see the full picture of who I had become, because they were too caught up in their own world to see mine. And that was fine. I didn't need their approval, their validation, or their understanding. I was not their story to write anymore. I smiled, turned away, and walked out of the room. The night air was cool and refreshing, and as I took a deep breath, I knew one thing for certain: I had found peace. I had found my own path, and I was no longer afraid to walk it, alone or otherwise. The days following the gathering felt like a fog had lifted. The weight that had once settled on my shoulders, the constant fear of being judged, the guilt of my choices, all of it had disappeared. I was free, in every sense of the word. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking back. I wasn't trying to make sense of a past that had already been written. I was focused on the future, on the life I was building, and it felt like a new chapter was unfolding every day. I threw myself into my work, into creating a business I had always dreamed of. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone, not Daniel, not my family, not even myself. It was about doing something for me. I was no longer defined by who I had been with or who I had been expected to be. I was now defined by what I had created, what I had built with my own two hands. As the months passed, I watched my business grow, my confidence grow. Every small victory, every milestone achieved, felt like a testament to my strength. I didn't need anyone's approval. I didn't need validation from the people who had once told me I wasn't enough. I was enough, and more. But then, one day, I received a message from my mother. It was simple, just a few words, but the meaning behind it was clear: we need to talk. The old part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep moving forward without looking back. But something inside me knew that this was a conversation I couldn't avoid. I agreed to meet her at a cafe, but I walked in with no expectations. I wasn't going to be the broken woman anymore. I wasn't going to let her guilt me into feeling small. I was going to go in there as the woman I had become, strong, independent, unapologetically me. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, looking out at the street. Her face softened when she saw me, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years: regret. But she didn't speak of it. Instead, she simply said, "I was wrong." Those words, simple as they were, felt like the release of years of tension. For once, I didn't have to defend my choices, didn't have to justify why I had left. She was acknowledging it, acknowledging me. And in that moment, I realized that this conversation wasn't about seeking approval anymore. It wasn't about convincing anyone of my worth. It was about closing a chapter in a way that finally gave me peace. We talked for hours that day, sharing stories, apologies, and the understanding that life had taken us down different paths. But the most important thing was this: I didn't need her to see me in a certain light. I didn't need anyone's validation anymore. I had finally found my place in the world, and it was enough. As I walked out of that cafe, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I had done it. I had reclaimed my life. And now, the story I had been telling myself all these years, the story of survival, of being broken, of being abandoned, had finally come to an end. It wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of the rest of my life. If this story of survival, empowerment, and reclaiming one's life resonated with you, please hit the like button right now. My favorite moment was when she walked away from her past without looking back, fully stepping into her own power. What part of this journey inspired you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to support more stories of strength, resilience, and women rising above adversity.